Hello there everybody, Adam Cleary from FourFourTwo here, and despite it being billed as a Champions League playoff, Newcastle United managed to score 5 goals in 21 minutes past Tottenham Hotspur and are now odds-on favourites to secure qualification. Now of course, this rapid ascent of the division has led to several questions from fans of other clubs and members of the footballing community, but I think the most eloquently put one I've heard so far is,
how is Murphy doing this?
Excellently put. And I mean, it's a fair one as well, because Jacob Murphy is simply the latest in a very long line of footballers who not only looked finished at Newcastle United, but arguably finished in this division that have played an enormous role in Eddie Howe dragging the team back into Europe. Just to give you an idea of the scale of that sort of transformation, this is the Newcastle United 11 as it lined up against Tottenham. You've got Fabian Schar here, a man who at the start of last season was so far down the pecking order at centre-back, he was now behind full-back Emil Kraft and central midfielder Isaac Hayden. There's Sean Longstaff, a player who under Steve Bruce's careful tutelage went from a £25 million bid from Manchester United to talk of loaning him to a championship side to try and rediscover some form. There's Joe Willock, who'd gone from chasing Alan Shearer's consecutive goal-scoring record to not providing a single worthwhile attacking contribution all season. Joelinton, a player who arrived as this big mega bucks £40 million number 9 centre-forward and managed just 2 goals in his entire first season, widely regarded at the time as arguably one of the biggest flops in Premier League history. And Jacob Murphy, a player who was forced to go out on loan to West Bromwich Albion and Sheffield Wednesday, where it was widely believed he'd found his level, but now who goes around inviting the following question.
How has Murphy just pulled out prime Steven Gerrard?
And also appearing from the bench we had Miguel Almiron, who everyone agreed was very good at running around in circles and nothing else. Add to this Nick Pope, who got relegated with Burnley last season, and Dan Burn, who'd fallen down the pecking order at Brighton, and that is a frankly fucking remarkable team to be in the top 3. And yes, of course, they have spent money. There is quality in this squad they couldn't have ever previously got their hands on. Alexander Isak at 60 million when he's been fit, he's been amazing. Bruno Fernandes, there's an argument he's the most transformative signing in the history of this football club. And Sven Botman, who to me is like this weird Dutch gene splicing experiment where they put the brain of Franco Baresi into the body of a space orc from Warhammer 40,000. Those 3 acquisitions in particular, by the way, about the same cost as Chelsea spent on Enzo Fernandez alone. So yes, they have spent money, obviously, but that doesn't answer the question,
how is Murphy doing this?
And to answer that, we simply have to look at both the training techniques and the philosophy of one man, Edward John Frank Howe, or Eddie to you and me. First and foremost, Eddie Howe is a man who believes that all things can be improved. Whether that's the overall performance of a team, the individual ability of players, or even, crucially, his own skills as a coach. During his 2-year sabbatical, he went around the world learning from other coaches, both in football and without, to see what philosophies, what mindsets, what approaches, what new innovations he could add to his own approach. He shadowed Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. He spent some time in Spain learning how Rayo Vallecano had pulled away from a relegation mess and how Simeone was constantly challenging Madrid and Barcelona on a fraction of their budget. And even Saracens, which, as I've just discovered, is actually a rugby team and not, as I had initially thought, the Gladiator. And the reason he did this is because he fundamentally believes every single thing can be improved. And if he's not at a club with players and a team to improve, he spends the time improving himself. Now, you don't need me to illustrate for you how Newcastle United have improved as a team. The league table can do that for me. But what we can have a look at is individual players and how their game has massively changed under his tutelage. Tutelage, is that a word? Tutelage. Now, first off, the most interesting of these is, of course, Joelinton. He was on the left side of attack against Tottenham, but it's not uncommon to see him move into this position, the left side of centre midfield, under Howe. And what's happened here is probably the single best example of how Eddie Howe operates on a man management level. He's excellent, one of the best in the world, genuinely, at identifying areas of a player's game which they have the raw materials to go and improve, challenging them to do it, getting them motivated to do it, devising a dedicated training regime that will help them do it, and then factoring in that change in their playing style into how the team functions. Now, the circumstances of him ending up in that position were because Kieran Clark got sent off at Norwich. There was a bit of fortune about it, but Eddie Howe didn't see that game as just, well, he's filled in there, but what we need him to do is score loads of goals. He looked at Joelinton and thought, you are not going to be a number 9 centre forward. You haven't got it in your locker to be that kind of player. But what I can see in you is that you are excellent on the ball. Your close control is amazing. You can drive with it brilliantly. You should be playing much deeper. And since then, Joelinton's never been back in the centre forward position. He's been deployed in any of these 3 positions across the midfield. He covers back to help down Burn. He provides a lot of strength. He provides a lot of defensive solidity. But when he gets on the ball, he does not look to pass it. He looks to run with it up the pitch, and players cannot get him off it. Great example of this in the Spurs game itself. They get the ball to Joelinton out wide, and he's not looking to get to the byline with it. He's not looking to bring anybody else in. His job is to run towards the goal and create absolute pandemonium in the process. Willock makes an excellent overlapping run to take one of the defenders away. He just charges all the way into the box and gets his shot off. If you look here, his numbers for being an all-action, ball-carrying centre midfielder are just absolutely off the charts. Like, he just flies past people with his take-ons. He gets a load of touches in the attacking penalty area. He receives lots of progressive parries. He carries the ball for fun. Even just little things like identifying how good his first touch is and trying to find ways to build that into the team's approach. Like, they'll quite often look to get the ball to Fabian Schar, who will drift sort of onto the right-hand side of the defence. Joelinton will then curve his run behind the fullback to get in here. They'll play a long ball. If they time it well, he's clean through on goal. Now, yes, he got a goal from doing that against Spurs at St James's Park, but he got one against West Ham, and they literally did it to Spurs in the reverse fixture and just didn't score from it. Miguel Almiron's another one it's really worth talking about, because he was getting completely written off as having zero-end product prior to Howe coming into the club, and then it was at one stage the club's top scorer, having gone on just the most bizarre run of goals. He looked at Almiron and saw a player who had the ability to develop his finishing, someone who should be scoring more goals given the talent he had at his disposal, but was neither getting in the positions to do them nor being found by his teammates when he was. And lo, as Miguel Almiron's finishing improved, Newcastle developed a specific pattern of play designed to make use of that. It involved getting Bruno Fernandes, the team's best passer, into this area of the pitch to link up with both Trippier and Almiron. They would wait for a defender to get drawn towards the ball, and the centre forward, whether that's Isak or Wilson, would drop a little bit deeper, creating a bit of space with the centre backs. Almiron would fire the ball into Bruno. He would make the run directly towards goal, and it was then Bruno's job, either across the floor or in the air, to find him in a goal-scoring position. It worked against Leicester City, it worked against Fulham, it worked time and time and time again. And it made him look like this absolute world beater, like one of the best right-sided attackers in world football. But it's still the same player that was running around in circles under Steve Bruce. It's just Eddie Howe had identified one specific area of his game that he was able to improve, and then he'd used that to improve the team as a whole by taking advantage of it. It's not rocket science. And I mean, I could spend absolutely hours telling you all the little individual elements of players' games that have improved over the last 18 months. Joe Willock's ability to run with the ball, to carry it in a way that just splits through defences. Sean Longstaff's ability to identify space both in the defensive phase and the attacking phase. How his runs into the box have created so many goals for other players, and people just don't really see him doing it. Like, the list goes on and on and on and on. And again, this just all comes down to the philosophy that Eddie Howe has, that every single player can, in one way or another, improve something about their game, and his job as a manager is to take those improvements and to use them to improve the team as a whole. And thus, for all the talk you hear about the money that has and no doubt will be spent on this football club, what's actually got them to third in the Premier League and the very cusp of the Champions League itself is the improvements Eddie Howe has made in players like Fabian Schar, in Sean Longstaff, in Joe Willock, in Joelinton, in Miguel Almiron, and of course, Murphy! This team is so much more than the sum of its parts. If you don't believe me, just go back 18 months, go back 2 years, because most of these parts were there then and they were bottom of the league. Anyway, my dear chums, that is how Eddie Howe has improved so many players at Newcastle United Football Club, and how they will almost certainly, don't jinx it, qualify for the Champions League this season. If you've enjoyed that, please do leave us a comment, let us know what you thought, and of course, please do subscribe to the FourFourTwo YouTube channel, where we make fun stuff like this all the time. You can even, if you're so obliged, hit the little bell and you'll never miss a single video. In the meantime though, thank you so much for watching. I have been Adam Cleary, this has been FourFourTwo, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.